The Galactic Assembly Hall was the largest building had ever seen. It stretched for 3 kilometers in every direction. The floor was made of black polished stone that reflected the lights above like a dark mirror. The ceiling was a giant dome that showed live images of 1,000 different suns from across the galaxy. It was beautiful. It was terrifying, and stood there completely alone. She was 34 years old. Before this, she had been a scientist who studied stars and space. Now she was the first and only human to represent Earth at the Galactic Council. The journey here had taken 6 months. She had prepared for 3 years, and as she looked around the massive hall, she felt very, very small. The 12 elder races sat on platforms high above her. Each platform was designed for a different species. They looked like living crystals that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. There were clouds of colored gas that floated and shifted constantly. There were giant snake-like creatures with scales that shimmered like liquid metal. There were others too, beings so strange that S's mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Her platform was at the very bottom of the hall. It was small and plain. She had to look up just to see the lowest of the other representatives. This was not an accident. The elder races wanted her to know her place. High Arbiter uncoiled his massive body and spoke. His voice was deep and echoed through the hall. He was the leader of this council, who had lived for over 2,000 years. His 4 eyes looked down at with something between amusement and boredom. The human representative wishes to address the council again, announced. She wants to speak about the drift crisis. Laughter filled the chamber. It came in many forms. Some species clicked their mandibles. Others whistled through breathing holes. The changed colors and patterns that meant mockery. His translation device turned all of it into one message. They were laughing at her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, so she held them behind her back. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she said. Her voice sounded thin and weak in the vast space. As the Council knows, the drift has consumed 17 star systems in the past cycle. Billions of beings have died. Entire civilizations have been erased. "We are aware," said. His tone suggested he was already bored. "I have prepared a proposal," continued. She activated her holographic display. Charts and numbers floated in the air before her. A coordinated effort between all species. Evacuation plans for systems in the drift's path. Research teams to study its patterns. I believe that if we work together. "Work together," the interruption came from representative of the. His gaseous form flickered with bright, aggressive colors. "With humans. Your species has been traveling in space for barely 200 years. We have studied the drift for 50,000 years. What could you possibly contribute?" Kept her voice steady. "If you look at the gravitational data, I have found a pattern. The drift moves in a specific way. There is an oscillation, a rhythm to its expansion. I believe this means." "Your mathematics are primitive," said, cutting her off again. "Your technology is laughable. Your species still fights wars over resources on a single planet. You were given a seat on this council as a kindness, nothing more. Do not mistake our generosity for respect." The representative made a sound like breaking glass. Perhaps the human should come back in a few thousand years, when her species has grown up. More laughter, more mockery. Stood very still. She looked at her holographic display, at the data she had spent years collecting. She had discovered something important. She was sure of it. The pattern in the drift's movement was not random. It suggested something artificial, something designed. But no one would let her finish speaking. She looked up at the elder races. These were beings who had mastered technologies that humans could barely imagine. They had built empires that spanned thousands of stars. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean. They had knowledge and power beyond anything Earth had ever known. And they would not even look at her data. A strange feeling came over. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder, something quieter. It was the feeling of finally understanding where she stood. "I see," she said softly. She turned off her holographic display. She gathered her documents. She straightened her jacket. Human's voice was sharp with surprise. "What are you doing? The session is not finished. You cannot simply leave." Looked at him. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Assembly, she did not feel afraid. "I am going home," she said. "Home?" Colors flashed with confusion. "But we have not dismissed you. You have not received permission to." "I do not need your permission." The chamber went silent. No one had ever spoken to the council this way. Certainly no human had. His four eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake, human. If you leave now, you will not be welcomed back. Your species will lose its seat on this council." Almost smiled. "With respect, High Arbiter, we never really had one." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. The doors were far away, and every step felt like a small act of rebellion. "What do you think you will accomplish?" called after her. His voice had an edge of real curiosity now. "You have no resources, no allies, no advanced technology. You are one small human from one small planet." Stopped at the door. She turned one last time to face the assembled might of the galactic community. "I am going to solve the drift crisis," she said simply, "and I am going to do it without you." More laughter. This time it was louder, longer. Some species made sounds of disbelief. Others made gestures that meant she was insane. Did not care. She walked through the doors, and they sealed behind her with a soft hiss. The laughter faded to silence. She was alone in a long corridor, her reflection staring back at her from the polished walls. For a moment, she stood very still. The weight of what she had done pressed down on her. She had just walked away from the most powerful political body in the known galaxy. She had rejected 50,000 years of accumulated wisdom. She had declared that one human could succeed where the elder races had failed. It was ridiculous, it was arrogant, it was probably impossible. Started walking toward the docking bay where her small ship waited. Behind her, the Galactic Council returned to its debates. Within minutes, they had forgotten about the strange little human who had dared to speak to them as an equal. She was insignificant. Her species was insignificant. The universe would continue as it always had, guided by the wise hands of the elder races. They did not know it yet, but they had just made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated a human. The research station sat high in the mountains of Province, surrounded by pine trees and silence. It was old and small and falling apart. The roof leaked when it rained. The heating system made strange noises at night. The computers were so outdated that most scientists refused to use them. It was perfect. Arrived on a cold morning in early spring. Snow still covered the mountain peaks, but the valley below was starting to turn green. She carried one bag and a box of documents that contained 3 years of research, everything she owned in the world. Was waiting for her at the gate. He was 53 years old, tall and thin, with gray hair that stuck up in every direction. He had been building spacecraft since before was born. The official space programs had called him crazy and fired him twice. He had been working at this forgotten station for 10 years, building things that nobody wanted. "So you are the one who told the Galactic Council to go away," he said. His face was serious, but his eyes were smiling. "I just walked out of a meeting." Same thing to them. He took her bag and started walking toward the main building. "Come inside. The coffee is bad, but at least it is hot." The station had 6 buildings, but only 2 were still in use. The main building held the laboratory, the computer room, and a small kitchen. The second building had sleeping quarters for the staff. Everything else had been abandoned years ago. "How many people work here?" asked. 3 including me, 4 now that you are here. Poured her a cup of coffee. It was indeed bad. "The government forgot we exist. They send us a small budget every year and never check what we do with it. It is not much, but it is freedom." Spread her documents across a large table. Charts, graphs, equations, observations. Everything she had collected about the drift. The elder races have been studying the drift for 50,000 years, she said, but they are looking at it wrong. They assume it is a natural phenomenon like a storm or a black hole, so they try to understand its physics. They measure its energy. They calculate its expansion rate. And you think differently. I think they are asking the wrong questions, pointed to a series of patterns in the data. Look at this. The drift does not expand randomly. It follows a rhythm. It pulses. It breathes. Natural phenomena do not behave this way. Leaned closer. He studied the patterns for a long time without speaking. You think someone made it, he said finally. Yes. You think someone built a machine that eats galaxies? Yes. He was quiet for another moment. Then he smiled, a wide and genuine smile that made him look 20 years younger. That is the most interesting thing anyone has said to me in a decade. What do you need? Over the next few months, others came. Arrived first. She was 31, a mathematician who had been thrown out of 3 universities for her unusual ideas. She believed that the standard equations of physics were incomplete, that there were hidden variables that everyone else had missed. The academic world had laughed at her. She had stopped caring about their laughter a long time ago. Came next. He was 45, a former pilot who had lost his license after a controversial incident at an asteroid mining platform. The official story was that he had been reckless and dangerous. The unofficial story was that he had saved 40 lives by flying his ship in a way that the regulations said was impossible. Was the last to join. She was 28, a biologist who studied alien life forms. She believed that despite their strange appearances, alien species were more similar to humans than anyone wanted to admit. This idea had made her unpopular in scientific circles. It had also made her very good at understanding how alien minds worked. They were all misfits, rejects, people the world had mocked and ignored. They were exactly what needed. The work was slow and difficult. They had no money from the Global Space Agency. They had no support from the Galactic Council. They took apart old machines and rebuilt them. They wrote their own computer programs. They ran experiments on equipment that should have been thrown away years ago. But slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to form. "I have found it," announced one night. It was very late and she had not slept in 2 days. Her eyes were red and her hands were shaking from too much coffee, but her voice was steady and certain. Everyone gathered around her computer screen. "The drift is not natural," said. "It is a machine, a very old, very large machine." "A machine that does what?" asked. "It erases," pulled up a visualization. Complex patterns swirled on the screen, beautiful and terrifying. Someone built a device that can erase reality itself. It started small, maybe the size of a planet, but it grows. It feeds on the energy of the things it destroys. The more it consumes, the larger it becomes. "Who would build such a thing?" asked quietly. "I do not know, but I know this. There is a control mechanism at the center, a heart. That is where the original device is. That is where it all began." Studied the data. Her mind was racing. "The elder races never found this because they never looked for it," she said slowly. "They assumed the drift was natural, so they never searched for a machine. They never asked who might have created it. They thought they were too smart to ask stupid questions," said. "Exactly." The room was silent for a long moment. Everyone understood what this meant. If the drift was a machine, then maybe, just maybe, it could be turned off. But the heart of the drift was deep inside a region of space that no ship had ever survived. The energy fields there tore apart any vessel that came close. The elder races had tried for thousands of years and failed every time. "We need to get to the center," said. "We need to reach the heart and shut it down." "The elder races cannot do it," said. "Their ships use technology. The drift disrupts. They cannot get close enough." "Then we build a ship that does not use." Everyone stared at her. Said carefully, "The only alternative is nuclear pulse propulsion. That technology is 200 years old. It is slow and dangerous, and the Galactic Council banned it before humans even left Earth. Then it is a good thing. We are not asking the Galactic Council for permission. Looked around at her small team. A mathematician, a pilot, a biologist, an engineer, and herself, a scientist who had been laughed out of the most important meeting in the galaxy. They had no money, they had no support, they had no advanced technology. But they had something the elder races had lost a long time ago. They had the courage to try something impossible. "We are going to build a ship," said, "and we are going to fly it into the heart of the drift, and we are going to save the galaxy." Nobody laughed. Instead, they got to work. They named the ship after the sacred mountain that stood on the border between two nations. It was a name that meant strength and endurance, a name that spoke of things that lasted forever. The ship itself was not beautiful. It was ugly and awkward, a patchwork of old parts and new ideas held together by determination and hope. It was the most important thing humanity had ever built. Led the construction. He worked 18 hours a day, sleeping only when his body refused to function anymore. His hands were always covered in grease and burns. He talked to the ship like it was a living thing, encouraging it, scolding it, promising it that everything would be all right. "The elder races use technology," he explained one day as he welded another panel into place. "It is clean and efficient and fast, but collapse near the drift. The energy disrupts them completely. That is why no one can get close. So we use something older," said. "Nuclear pulse propulsion. We explode small nuclear devices behind the ship, and the explosions push us forward. It is slow. It is dangerous. The Galactic Council banned it 10,000 years ago because they considered it barbaric. But it works near the drift." Smiled. "It works everywhere. Nuclear explosions do not care about energy fields or space distortions. They just explode. Simple physics, primitive physics. Primitive might save us all." The shielding was contribution. She studied the energy patterns of the drift for weeks, filling notebooks with equations that no one else could understand. Finally, she designed a magnetic containment system that used the drift's own energy against itself. The more the drift tried to tear the ship apart, the stronger the shields would become. "It is like a mirror," she said. "The drift attacks and we reflect the attack back. In theory, we could fly straight through the worst of it." "In theory?" asked. "I have never tested it. No one has ever tested it. This is all new." "Wonderful." Word spread as word always does. At first, only a few people knew about the project. But secrets do not stay secret forever, especially secrets this big. Within months, the story had traveled around the world. A group of misfits in a forgotten research station were building a ship to save the galaxy. It sounded like something from a children's story. Many people laughed, but many more did not. Young engineers started arriving at the station. They came from Seoul and from Tokyo and Beijing, from Mumbai and Cairo, and they came with tools and skills and dreams. They came because they believed that humanity could do something important, even if the rest of the galaxy thought otherwise. The Global Space Agency officially condemned the project. They called it reckless and unauthorized. They threatened to arrest everyone involved. But quietly, secretly, supplies began appearing at the station. Parts that the team needed but could not afford. Fuel for the nuclear drive. Food for the growing number of workers. Someone high up in the government believed in them. Someone was helping. The Galactic Council sent messages demanding that Earth stop this foolish project. They warned of consequences. They threatened to remove humanity from all galactic institutions. Earth's government sent back polite replies that said nothing at all. The grew larger day by day. Watched it all with a mixture of pride and fear. Pride because her small idea had become something real. Fear because she knew what they were attempting. No ship had ever survived the outer regions of the drift. No one knew what waited at the center. They were flying into the complete unknown on a vessel held together by hope and stubbornness. The night before launch, she found standing outside the main building. He was looking up at the stars, his face illuminated by their distant light. The mountain air was cold and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees. "Cannot sleep?" asked. "No," he did not look at her. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "There are many ways." "I know." He finally turned to face her. "When I was 22, I flew my first ship. Everyone told me not to. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too reckless. I flew anyway, and I crashed into an asteroid mining platform. I read about that. You saved 40 lives. I also almost killed myself and destroyed a very expensive piece of equipment." He smiled slightly. "They called me arrogant. They said I did not respect the rules. They took away my license. But you saved 40 lives." "Yes." His smile faded. "That is the thing about doing something impossible. You might succeed. You might fail. You might do both at the same time. The universe does not care about our intentions, only our results." Thought about his words for a long moment. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Terrified, but I was afraid before and I flew anyway. Fear is not a reason to stop. Fear is just information. It tells you that something matters. This matters. This matters more than anything I have ever done." He looked back at the stars. "What about you? Are you afraid?" Considered lying, but deserved the truth. "Yes," she said. "I am afraid that I was wrong. I am afraid that I led all these people on a path to their deaths. I am afraid that the elder races were right about us, that we are just primitive creatures who do not understand our place in the universe. And if they were right, then we fail, and the drift consumes everything, and in 1,000 years no one will remember that humans ever existed. But if we succeed..." Looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there the drift was growing. Somewhere out there billions of beings were dying. And somewhere at the heart of it all was a machine that someone had built a very long time ago. "If we succeed," she said, "then everything changes." The next morning the launched. It rose from a field in the Korean countryside, carried aloft by fire and thunder. The sound was tremendous. The ground shook. Windows broke in buildings 10 kilometers away. But the ship flew and strapped themselves into their seats as the acceleration pushed them back. The sky turned from blue to black. The stars emerged from the darkness. Behind them, the earth grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light among millions. The Galactic Council sent a final message. It was from High Arbiter himself. "Your species will be remembered," he said. Could not tell if it was a blessing or a farewell. It did not matter. They were already on their way. 4 humans in an ugly ship, flying toward the end of everything. The journey took 93 days. They moved slowly through the vast emptiness of space. By galactic standards, it crawled like an insect. Ships of the elder races could cross the same distance in hours, but those ships could not go where they was going. Their advanced technology became useless near the drift. Their engines failed. Their shields collapsed. They had no such problems. Its nuclear pulse drive exploded small bombs behind it, pushing it forward with raw, primitive force. Its magnetic shields absorbed the strange energies of the drift and threw them back. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated, but it worked. Inside the ship, the crew settled into a routine. Spent most of her time at the navigation computer, recalculating their course every few hours. The drift was unpredictable. It shifted and pulsed, changing shape in ways that no model could accurately predict. She had to constantly adjust their trajectory to avoid the worst of the distortions. Flew with incredible precision. He had a natural understanding of the ship, an instinct for how it would respond to every command. He threaded through gravitational anomalies that should have crushed them. He found paths through energy storms that the computers said were impossible. More than once, his skills saved their lives. monitored the life support systems and studied the readings from their sensors. The deeper they went into the drift, the stranger the readings became. Space itself was breaking down. Time moved differently from one moment to the next. Cause and effect sometimes ran backward. She documented everything, filling data storage with observations that would keep scientists busy for centuries. Coordinated it all, she barely slept. She ate when others reminded her to. She reviewed every piece of data, checked every calculation, made every difficult decision. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like a physical force. The lives of her crew, the hopes of humanity, the fate of the galaxy, all of it rested on her shoulders. Communication with Earth became difficult and then impossible. The drift's energy interfered with all signals. Their last message from home came on day 47. It was from, "We are watching," he said through the static. "Everyone on Earth is watching. Do what you need to do. We believe in you." After that, there was only silence. On day 62, they entered the outer boundary of the drift. It was like nothing any of them had ever seen. The universe twisted around them. Stars stretched into long lines of light. The blackness of space became alive with colors that had no names. Through the ship's windows, they could see reality itself bending, breaking, being rewritten by forces beyond comprehension. Shields held. The drift attacked them with everything it had, and the shields threw it all back. But the ship shook constantly now, trembling like a living thing in pain. "How much longer?" asked through gritted teeth. He was fighting the controls, struggling to keep them on course. 31 days to the center, said. "Maybe less if we can find a cleaner path." There was no cleaner path, but they kept going anyway. On day 78, made a discovery. "I am detecting life signs," she announced. Her voice was filled with wonder. "Inside the drift, something is alive in here." "That is impossible," said. "Nothing can survive these conditions." "Nothing we know of," studied her readings. "But these signals are definitely biological, or something very similar to biological. They are everywhere, millions of them, maybe billions." Felt a chill run down her spine. "What are they?" "I do not know. They are too far away to scan properly. But they are moving toward the center, just like us." They did not see the life forms directly, but sometimes in the corners of their vision, they caught glimpses of shadows moving through the chaos. Large shapes, ancient shapes, things that had adapted to this impossible environment over millions of years. On day 87, they saw the heart. It appeared on their sensors first, a massive structure at the center of everything. Then, as they grew closer, it became visible through the distortion. A sphere the size of a small moon, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. It was not made of any material they could identify. It was not quite matter and not quite energy. It was something else entirely. "It looks like a heart," whispered. "Because that is what it is," replied. "The heart of the drift, the machine that started everything." Worked her instruments feverishly. "I am detecting a control interface. It is near the top of the structure, relatively simple compared to the rest of the mechanism." "Simple enough to shut down." "Maybe, but there is a problem." His face was pale. "The interface requires physical contact. Someone has to go out there and touch it directly." The crew looked at each other. "I will go," said. "No," shook his head. "You are the mission commander. You need to stay with the ship. And you are the only one who can fly us out of here, is the only one who understands the navigation, is the only one who can keep the life support running." Stood up. "I am the only one we can afford to lose." "That is not true," said softly. "It is true enough." Was already moving toward the airlock. "If I fail, we'll find another way. If she fails, you find a way to survive. That is how this works. We are humans. We do not give up. We find another way." His voice crackled suddenly from the communication system. It was impossible. They were too far from Earth for any signal to reach them. But somehow, through all the interference and distortion, his words came through. "Be careful out there." She smiled. Perhaps it was a glitch in the system. Perhaps space and time were so broken here that signals from the past could reach the present. Perhaps it did not matter. "I will do my best," she said. She put on her spacesuit. She checked every seal, every connection, every system. The suit was as primitive as the ship, built for durability rather than elegance. It would protect her from the vacuum of space. It would not protect her from the energies of the drift. But that was a risk she had to take. The airlock opened and stepped out into the heart of darkness. The universe went mad around her. Colors that should not exist swirled in every direction. She saw stars being born and dying in the same moment. She saw galaxies collapse into points of infinite density. She saw things that her mind could not process, things that no human was ever meant to see. But she kept moving, one step at a time, toward the heart, toward the machine that was eating the universe. Behind her, the waited. Inside it, her crew watched and hoped and prayed. Ahead of her, the end of everything waited, and walked toward it because someone had to. Because that is what humans do. Floated through chaos. Her suit's small thrusters pushed her forward, meter by meter, toward the massive structure that filled her vision. The heart of the drift was even larger up close. Its surface was covered with symbols and patterns that seemed to move and change as she watched. Some part of her mind understood that these were instructions, a language written in mathematics and energy, but the meaning was beyond her comprehension. She did not need to understand it. She only needed to reach the control interface and shut it down. The journey seemed to take forever. Time was strange here, stretching and compressing in ways that made no sense. Sometimes she felt like she had been floating for hours. Sometimes it felt like only seconds had passed. She stopped looking at her suit's clock. It had stopped working anyway. Around her, she began to see them, the life forms that had detected. They were enormous, bigger than buildings, bigger than ships. They looked like nothing she had ever seen before. Some were like vast jellyfish, their transparent bodies filled with stars. Others were like living storms, clouds of gas and electricity that pulsed with inner light. Still others were shapes that her eyes could not properly see, things that existed in more dimensions than 3. They watched her pass. They did not attack. They did not help. They simply observed these ancient beings who had made the drift their home. Wondered if they remembered who had built this place. She wondered if they knew what she was trying to do. But there was no way to ask them, and she did not have time to try. The surface of the heart was rough and strange beneath her gloves. She climbed slowly, using her magnetic boots to keep herself attached. The symbols under her hands were warm, pulsing with energy that she could feel even through her suit. They told a story, she realized. The story of the beings who had built this machine. They had been old, far older than any of the elder races that now ruled the galaxy. They had seen everything, done everything, understood everything. And in the end, they had grown tired, tired of existence, tired of change, tired of the endless struggle of life. So they had built a machine to end it all. Not just their own lives, but everything, every star, every planet, every form of life in the universe. A final reset, an eternal peace. They had called it mercy. Called it murder. She reached the top of the structure. The control interface was there, just as had predicted. It was surprisingly simple, a pedestal with a glowing panel at its center. After all the complexity and horror, the solution was almost anticlimactic. A switch on or off, continue or stop. Said into her communicator. She was not sure if the signal would reach the ship. I am at the interface. Static crackled in her ear, then's voice thin and distant. I see it on my sensors. There should be a central activation point. Press your hand against it. That is all. That is all. The original builders wanted it to be simple. They did not want any barriers between themselves and the end. Looked at the glowing panel. Such a small thing. Such a simple action. One hand pressed against a surface and the fate of the galaxy would change. His voice now rough with emotion. Whatever happens, we are proud of you, all of us. "Tell the council," said, "that humanity sends its regards." She pressed her hand against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. The universe held its breath. The ancient life forms around her went still. Even the chaos of the drift seemed to pause. Then the heart began to dim. The symbols on its surface flickered and faded. The pulsing warmth under his hand grew cold. The massive structure that had been eating the universe for millions of years began to shut down, one system at a time. Around her, the chaos started to calm. The colors became less intense. The distortions became less severe. Space itself began to remember what it was supposed to look like. Watch it happen, floating in silence. She had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, she had done it. They arrived beside her. The airlock opened, and hands reached out to pull her inside. She fell into the arms of her crew, and they held her as the drift died around them. The journey home took 4 months. Without the drift's interference, they were able to send messages ahead. By the time they reached Earth's solar system, the entire galaxy knew what had happened. The Galactic Assembly Hall was fuller than it had ever been. Not just the 12 elder races, but representatives from dozens of others. Species that had never been invited to the council before. Species that had been dismissed as too young, too primitive, too insignificant to matter. They were all there now. Stood at the center of the hall on a new platform that had been built especially for this moment. Her crew stood beside her, had traveled from Earth to be there. Behind them, on screens that stretched across the entire dome, the face of the was displayed. The ugly, impossible ship that had saved everything. High Arbiter spoke first. His voice carried no mockery now, only respect. "The human representative has been recognized by this council," he said, "for ending the drift crisis, for saving approximately 400 billion sentient lives, for demonstrating qualities that this assembly had underestimated." Stepped forward, she looked around the vast chamber at all the faces watching her. "I did not do this alone," she said. "My crew made it possible. The people of Earth who believed in us made it possible. Every person who was ever told they were too small, too weak, too primitive to matter, they made it possible." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You called humanity primitive. You said we were too young, too violent, too foolish to contribute anything. And maybe you were right. We are young. We are sometimes violent. We make foolish mistakes." Her eyes found. "But we also ask questions that others have forgotten to ask. We try things that others have dismissed as impossible. We walk away from rooms where we are not wanted, and we change everything anyway." The chamber was silent. "The drift was built by beings who thought they had all the answers," continued. "They were so convinced of their own wisdom that they decided the universe should end. They forgot the most important truth in existence." She smiled. "There is always something new to learn, and sometimes the voices have the most important things to say." The applause started slowly, then grew until it filled the entire hall. Hundreds of species, thousands of individuals, all acknowledging what humanity had done, what one small team of misfits had accomplished. 3 years later, a plaque was mounted on the wall of the old research station in Province. It read, "They laughed at us, we kept working." Below those words were 5 names. And the ones who had walked away from a universe that did not want them and changed everything anyway. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see that plaque, to stand where it all began, to understand how a handful of humans had saved everything. Still worked there, building ships that were not supposed to be possible. He was 70 years old now, but his eyes were still bright with dreams. Sometimes, when the sky was clear and the stars were bright, he swore he could hear his voice carried on the wind. "Keep asking why," it said. "Keep walking forward. Keep changing everything." And somewhere in the stars, across the galaxy that humanity had saved, that message echoed forever. The ones who were mocked. The ones who were ignored. The ones who walked away and changed the universe. Humanity